On this Saturday night, the protests over policing. The demonstrations in Canada's capital demanding change. And the push to keep the momentum alive. Trumpeting Trump in Tulsa, where racial tensions run high. The battle between China and India, two nuclear powers on the brink. Plus, basketball is ready to hit the courts. Hockey wants in the arenas, but do the players have their head in the game?
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin with more anti-racist protests on Canadian streets. Demonstrators in Ottawa and Toronto are out again today, demanding systemic change to policing across this country. As Abigail Bimman reports, many see the movement making a difference and want to keep the momentum alive.
In Toronto, demonstrators took a knee near the U.S. consulate, a show of solidarity against racism on both sides of the border.
I just wanted to keep the momentum going.
Momentum some fear will dissipate nearly 4 weeks after demonstrations began. In Toronto, there were calls to defund police.
A lot of us come from immigrant communities, and when you start out in an immigrant community, a lot of people live in government-funded housing, neighborhoods like Regent Park that are poorer. And they don't have youth outreach programs there. They don't have a lot of things that they need to diminish crime, to be well, to succeed in life and stuff like that, and that's why we're here.
Ottawa's march started at police headquarters, organized by a group called Justice for Abdirahman. The 2016 death of Abdirahman Abdi is one of Ottawa's highest profile cases of police violence. The officer involved was charged criminally, and that case is ongoing.
We would like our police services to be about community safety. It's about well-being and security, not about enforcement, not about armed officers coming into situations they should not be in. It's about ensuring that our community feels safe and don't feel threatened.
And amid the calls for systemic change, Ottawa's police chief listened from the edge of the crowd. This week, the Prime Minister once again acknowledged systemic racism and promised action.
We are going to be taking strong, bold, concrete actions to go at systemic discrimination in this country.
But offered no details. At the Ottawa March, people say it's important to keep filling the streets until change happens. And in other ways, the marches have already had an impact.
I work for the federal government, and I felt pretty alone during the George Floyd incident. I didn't really see a lot of my colleagues as outraged as I was, but when I'm out in the street here, I really feel that, you know what, I'm not alone in my outrage, and it's nice not to feel alone.
Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Donald Trump is kicking off his 2020 re-election campaign against the backdrop of calls for racial justice. Today's rally is taking place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city with a grim history when it comes to racism. Hundreds of African Americans were massacred in the city nearly a century ago. Adding to the controversy surrounding the campaign stump is that it's going ahead in spite of the concerns about the resurgence of COVID-19. Oklahoma just surpassed 10,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with the number of new cases rising steeply over the past week. 6 Trump campaign staffers have also tested positive for COVID-19. The campaign team says they're following quarantine protocols and won't attend the rally. But Trump supporters are showing little concern, flooding the city by the tens of thousands. Jennifer Johnson reports.
It's what Trump 2020 supporters have been waiting for, a rally to reignite his campaign after months on the sidelines and controversies.
It's just really important for us in the midst of everything going on to come out in really great numbers and show our support to President Trump.
The president looking to rally his base after missteps handling the COVID-19 pandemic, Black Lives Matter protests, and blockbuster allegations in former National Security Advisor John Bolton's new book. The rally is just blocks from Tulsa's Greenwood district, once the wealthiest black community in the nation, until a white mob burned it down in 1921, one of the worst episodes of racial violence in U.S. history. Historians believe as many as 300 black people were killed and more than 10,000 black residents were left homeless.
This land is very important to me. It's very sacred. It was born of necessity to take care of one another, take care of their own needs, but thrived, was a thriving economic center.
Despite the racial tension still in Tulsa and a record rise in cases of COVID-19, the rally was not relocated. President Trump warning any protesters, anarchists, agitators, looters, or lowlifes who are going to Oklahoma will be dealt with. Tulsa officials appealed to the state Supreme Court to force precautions like wearing masks, but lost. Campaign officials say masks will be voluntary.
What we've got is personal freedom, letting people make those decisions. We're encouraging everyone who would be in a high-risk category to have a negative outcome with COVID to maybe not participate.
Thousands are excited to attend. Despite fierce downpours and sunny days, many have camped out near the arena for close to a week. No worries about COVID. Attendees are having their temperatures checked, offered masks and hand sanitizer.
I would take a chance I get that virus, but I'm not going to get that virus.
At least 2 members of the White House coronavirus task force advised the Trump campaign against holding the rally. The president is looking for a boost, and his supporters are ready to give him one. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Protesters fighting racism filled streets and parks in European cities for a 4th weekend.
Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
In London, the leaders of Black Lives Matter are demanding to meet with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. They want Johnson to get rid of the head of a new commission on racial inequality, saying the appointee does not believe institutional racism exists in the UK. Demonstrators in Paris marched against racism and called for an end to police violence against the black community. This protest was permitted to go ahead despite concerns about COVID-19, but 3 others were banned, including one set to take place outside the U.S. Embassy. More fallout tonight from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's comments in Parliament this week. On Wednesday, Singh was kicked out of the House of Commons for calling the Bloc Québécois House leader a racist for refusing to support his motion dealing with systemic racism in the RCMP. The Bloc's leader is demanding an apology from Singh. And now former BQ leader Gill is weighing in on the matter. Mercedes Stevenson joins us to talk about that. Mercedes?
Robin, the former Bloc Québécois leader had some strong words for Jagmeet Singh, saying he didn't know if Singh's reaction to the Bloc House leader was genuine and calling Singh's response just plain stupid.
Blanchet made a speech saying that he recognized the existence of systematic racism. I think that Singh, the other thing he wanted to do was to get more support in the rest of Canada, knowing that he's losing to the Liberals, even in DC. So I think that was cheap politics from Jagmeet Singh. It won't help them in Quebec, not at all.
The Speaker of the House is currently deciding whether or not Singh will have to apologize for calling the Bloc House leader a racist. So far, Singh has refused to do so. And the Prime Minister has said it's not his place to judge Singh's actions as the only racialized party leader in the House of Commons. Gill thinks that Trudeau aligning himself with Singh is a misstep. We'll also talk to Mr. Duceppe about the French Conservative leadership debate which happened last week and who he thinks can take Quebec for the party. All 4 candidates were fairly stilted in their French, while some fared better than others. But many political analysts say without a strong NDP, the Conservatives will need to win seats in Quebec in order to win the next general election. Here is Mr. Duceppe's take on the debate and the Conservatives' chances in Quebec, given their French.
We chose to listen to the committee. That was the debate in French. I mean, 50 years after the adoption of the Official Languages Act in Canada, those people just can't speak French. I mean, I just don't understand that. And I think both of them, it be O'Toole or McKay, both of them are speaking a French which is worse than Andrew Scheer.
Robin, we'll also be talking to Canada's former ambassador to Beijing about China charging Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. Plus, we'll have the parliamentary budget watchdog. He's predicting a $256 billion deficit now, and he doesn't understand why the federal government is only putting out a snapshot coming up in July and hasn't released any kind of fiscal update when his office has done so regularly. And finally, we'll have a prominent scientist on the show who says that assuming there will be a COVID vaccine within the next year is giving people false hope, and that it's time to rethink how we'll get through this pandemic.
All right, thanks for that, Mercedes. And you can watch all of those interviews on the West Block with Mercedes Stevenson tomorrow right here on Global. A new twist tonight in the Conservative leadership race. Erin O'Toole's team is accusing a rival of stealing campaign data. O'Toole's camp says it has filed a formal complaint calling for a police investigation into the alleged actions by a member of Peter MacKay's team. They're accusing his campaign organizer, Jamie Lal, of being involved in the alleged hacking and theft of confidential strategy data. MacKay's team is dismissing the allegations, calling them mildly amusing. And Lal has responded in a tweet saying, "Not a single word of this is true." O'Toole and MacKay are considered to be leading the race to replace Andrew Scheer as the Conservative Party's next leader. The Trump administration's efforts to block the release of John Bolton's tell-all book have failed. Today, a federal judge ruled the former national security advisor can move forward in publishing his memoir. The White House was trying to stop the book from being made public because of concerns it contains classified information. During his ruling, the judge did make it clear he felt Bolton had gambled with the national security of the United States by publishing without formal clearance from the Trump administration. The book is scheduled to hit store shelves on Tuesday. The remains of all 6 Canadian soldiers killed in a helicopter crash have now been recovered. 4 of the members killed were positively identified by Ontario's chief coroner. They include Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike from Nova Scotia, Master Corporal Matthew Cousins from Ontario, Captain Maxime Morin from Quebec, and Captain Kevin Hagan from BC. The remains of Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobra and Captain Brendan McDonald were identified just after the accident. The military says the bodies will be released to the families over the coming days. The members were killed when a Cyclone helicopter crashed during a training exercise off the coast of Greece in April. Another major fight in U.S. politics has come to an end, this one between a top federal prosecutor and the Attorney General. Jeffrey Berman showed up at his office today, defying Attorney General William Barr, who just hours earlier ousted the lawyer. Last night, Barr released a statement announcing President Trump was nominating current Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Jay Clayton to succeed Berman. Berman was quick to fire back, saying he has no intention of resigning. Today, Barr said Trump had fired Berman, but late this afternoon, Trump said he's not involved. In the end, Berman gave up and stepped down. Berman's office prosecuted former Trump confidant Michael Cohen and has been overseeing investigations of other Trump allies, including his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Crews in Quebec are scrambling to contain an aggressive forest fire. The blaze is burning north of Quebec City in the province's Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region. It scorched more than 11,000 hectares of forest overnight. The fire threatens an area that includes chalets and fishing camps, so authorities have evacuated a large perimeter. The fire has now burned more than 58,000 hectares of land. And firefighters are battling that blaze as a heat wave grips parts of southern Quebec. In Montreal, the humidex is forecast to hit 40 degrees. The city has created a map online showing where people can cool off safely. Some outdoor pools have reopened with new COVID-19 restrictions. The heat wave is expected to last until Tuesday. Toronto is feeling the heat too. A heat warning has been issued with temperatures climbing to 30 degrees. The city has opened 15 emergency cooling centers, and staff will be on hand to remind people to maintain social distancing in the time of COVID-19. Coming up, the long fight between China and India. Tensions are running high between China and India. This week, soldiers from the two countries brawled along the border, leaving at least 20 dead. The dispute is over a contested area in the Himalayas. The two neighboring nuclear powers have fought over the border before, but this was the first time in close to 6 decades that anyone has been killed. As Mike Armstrong reports, both countries are calling for de-escalation, but they're not backing down.
This was a message. Video of Chinese military drills in Tibet released this week. The goal of the operation, according to reports, to test their soldiers' capabilities fighting at a high elevation. The goal of releasing the video is to tell its neighbor, India, it's ready to fight at a high elevation. The two countries came to blows this week in one of the most inhospitable, unforgiving, and highest regions in the world. Now, there is no clear demarcation between the Indian-controlled and Chinese-controlled territories. The border is usually called simply the line of actual control. Even some of the lower plateaus are at an altitude of 5,000 meters, a height that affects everything from the human body to weapons and vehicles. Now, hundreds of soldiers from the two companies have been stationed basically facing off across that line for months. There's been fear of a flare-up, and Monday it happened.
As you can see, some soldiers being injured.
According to reports, it would have been similar to this brawl in 2017. No shots were fired. Soldiers fought instead with fists, rocks, and bats. According to India, 20 of its soldiers were killed. There have been funerals throughout the week. Indian officials say there were casualties on both sides, but China has not confirmed that, instead saying only its soldiers were on site for negotiations and were attacked. This foreign ministry spokesperson says Indian troops crossed the line, provoking Chinese soldiers and triggering the brawl. Well, there are calls on India to retaliate for the loss of life. Protesters burned the Chinese president in effigy. There are also calls for boycotting Chinese products. For the Indian Prime Minister, who was re-elected last year in a campaign focused on national security, the pressure is building. India wants peace, the Prime Minister says, but if provoked, will provide an appropriate response. The two countries in 1962 fought a month-long war over the disputed border. Hundreds of soldiers on both sides were killed. Tensions have simmered for decades. The two countries were scheduled to hold trilateral talks this coming Tuesday with Russia. Despite the dispute, Indian officials say they will participate. Mike Armstrong, Global News.
Still ahead, the apology and the investigation into a massive coronavirus outbreak in Germany.
You're watching Global National.
Brazil's government says the country has surpassed more than 1 million confirmed coronavirus cases. That is second only to the U.S. Health specialists believe the actual number of cases could be 7 times higher. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is still downplaying the risks of the virus despite nearly 50,000 deaths in 3 months. He says the impact of social isolation on Brazil's economy can be even more deadly. The owner of one of Germany's largest meat processing firms has apologized for a mass infection at one of its plants. The plant is in Gütersloh. It has now been shut down. More than 1,000 workers have tested positive for COVID-19, and a quarantine has been ordered for the other 5,500 staff. Most are from Romania and Bulgaria, who lived in cramped company-provided accommodation. Germany's agriculture minister has launched an official investigation. Via Rail is implementing a face mask policy on its trains. The company will require passengers to wear masks for the duration of their trips, starting next week. Employees who interact with customers are also required to wear face coverings. Up next, the competing factors complicating the return of Major League sports. For months, sports fans have been hoping things would get back to normal, but it looks like they may have to wait a bit longer. The MLS, NFL, NHL, NBA, and MLB have all recently had athletes test positive for COVID-19. Canadian teams are being impacted. The Toronto Blue Jays have now shut down a Florida training facility after a player exhibited symptoms. And Maple Leaf star player Austin Matthews is isolating at his Arizona home after contracting the virus. As Mike Drolet explains, the new cases are casting doubt on when it might be game on.
With cavernous stadiums devoid of fans, the Premier League in England certainly doesn't look the same. But sports is coming back, and this is what it looks like. For now, at least. The reality is that nothing will look the same this year. The NBA will test players for COVID every other day when its season restarts next month at Disney World in Orlando. Or at least that was the plan before political and societal unrest overshadowed everything.
A lot of the players just don't feel it's an appropriate time to be playing with this debate. They feel like their minds are on somewhere else and something else.
It's just a step in the right direction. We don't have
That somewhere else is at the many rallies being held across the U.S., and some players have made it clear their hearts and minds are focused on the streets they grew up on, and not the basketball courts where they make a living. So if the NBA does resume, players could decide to stay home. The NHL could be facing a similar opt-out dilemma for COVID, not political reasons. Still, the NHL is now the most likely league to resume play, even as the Tampa Bay Lightning deal with a COVID outbreak. The league plans on splitting the teams between two as yet to be announced hub cities. Las Vegas is widely believed to be one, and one of three Canadian cities, Vancouver, Edmonton, or Toronto, could be chosen as well, provided the 14-day quarantine issue is addressed.
We are comfortable with moving forward on an NHL hub in one of three Canadian cities that are asking for it. Canada is open to it as long as it is okay by the local health authorities.
The most perplexing of sports remains baseball. While the Japanese and Korean leagues have resumed play, Major League Baseball's owners and players are squabbling with what a season would look like. And of course, money. Provided a deal is ratified, the quarantine rule could force the Blue Jays out of Toronto and into their Florida facility.
That's going to be interesting. This is where the Canadian factor does come into play. It doesn't happen all that often anymore, but this is one where it really does.
Complicating matters even more, Florida is in the midst of another COVID outbreak, and three professional teams, including the Blue Jays, have shut down their facilities because of positive tests. So while sports fans are eager to see their teams on the court, ice, or field, COVID and politics could have other ideas. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Saturday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Bence, Saskatchewan, just west of Saskatoon. We'd love to see your corner of this country, so email your pictures to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow and Monday. Good night.